I've been excited about the release of Starfield for years. Their NASA punk style harkens back to a time of boundless optimism about space exploration, and my body was ready for it. I've played well over 100 hours since release, and unfortunately, Starfield has been a confusing mess of contradictions, poor writing, and has given me a sense that many features and aspects of this game were thrown together haphazardly. Now, I'm not going to talk about the bugs and numerous gameplay flaws, because I am confident that some unpaid modder will come along and fix all of that, and help further enrich Bethesda and their new Microsoft masters. No, I want to talk about some of the weird flaws, contradictions, and just plain confusing parts of this game. First, I need to talk about Venus. So the time it takes for a planet to rotate on its axis is what we call a day. Earth takes about 24 hours to do this, and that is why we count time the way we do. On Venus, it takes about 243 Earth days to do 1 day. In Starfield, every moon and planet has a different day length, which is accurate. Now in the game, they make it take 100 Earth days for 1 day on Venus, but that is probably some kind of coding thing, and I get that. The problem is that an hour is still an hour. In Starfield, if you sleep on Venus for 8 hours, 800 Earth hours go by. That is not how any of this works. We don't magically sleep longer because of the planet we're on. This is a glaring mistake that could have easily been avoided by asking an expert. Maybe Bethesda didn't have the budget to hire an astrophysicist amongst the hundreds of millions of dollars they spent to make Starfield, but any high school science teacher could have cleared this up for them. Now, there is such a thing as time dilation, but that involves speeds approaching the speed of light and the warping of space caused by supermassive things like black holes, not standing on Earth versus Venus. Now, technically, because Earth is more massive than Venus, there would be a slight difference in how much relative time elapses. But we're talking a difference of milliseconds, not 100 times as long. I'm not nitpicking here. This isn't space is a vacuum, so there shouldn't be any sounds of lasers or explosions. Fiction always has flaws. I'm only addressing things that Bethesda has gone out of their way to include. So if Bethesda came and said, lasers make sounds in space, but missiles don't, then yeah, I'd mention it, because that's just weird. It is obvious that an immense amount of effort went into certain things, like how detailed all of the items are. I'm not sure we need a painstakingly crafted 3D model of every pen and package of synthetic meat, but you do you, Todd. However, my concern is that it seems that many decisions were made without real thought put into them. For example, you can choose between him, her, and they for the pronouns you want to be called by. Great! Most well-adjusted humans aren't going to take issue about a choice that takes you 3 seconds to read and select. Now all of your friends and companions will know what to call you. However, as you are fighting pirates and spacers inside your androgynous spacesuit, somehow they all know your preferred pronouns as well, even if you are in stealth mode. I mean, it makes sense. That spacer wants to gut me and wear my face as a mask, but they draw the line at making a microaggression by misgendering me. Which leads us to Enhance. These are the facilities where you can re-customize your character. Being able to change your character's appearance has been a standard feature in many games at this point, but Starfield wanted to make it a part of their world building. So every human in Starfield can change their sex, ethnic makeup, height, weight, and more at any time. On the vacation planet of Paradiso, they will even sell you a 2-pack so you can change yourself into someone new for your vacation, and change yourself back when you return to your mundane existence. I'm not sure why we would still have the same pronouns when every human can change that easily. Hey Todd, I have another question. If every human can look however they want, why do only people with darker pigmentation have stereotypical African accents? I mean, accents should have changed with the exodus and settlement of the stars, so it seems to me that your selection and application of voice actors was either really ignorant or really racist. While we're on the topic of things that people always agree on, let's talk about religion. Bethesda could have just made a future of our civilization and not touched on religion at all. However, that was not what we got. Instead, we have a meticulous timeline spanning from 2050 to 2330. This includes the diaspora from Earth and the history of the 3 current main religions, the Enlightened, the Sanctum Universum, and the House Varun. See, the advantage and problem of making science fiction that takes place in our future is that you are drawing upon our real-life present. That is why science fiction is always political. You paint a picture of the future that is based on real-life events and real-life politics. So, what happened to all the Christians, Todd? What happened to all of the Jews and Hindus? Todd, what did you do with all of the Muslims? Todd, your billionaire buddies at Microsoft are going to be real embarrassed at Davos next year if there is a fatwa issued over this because you exterminated entire religious groups in your space video game. Science fiction doesn't always talk about religion, but it often comes up. Arthur C. Clarke talked about how our modern religions faded away in one of the sequels to 2001: A Space Odyssey, 3001. Bethesda just leaves us with questions. Until I'm told otherwise, given how violent the reality of Starfield is, I'm thinking it was genocide. For a game that seems to try so hard not to offend anyone by stripping out sex and everything else that makes up the human experience, Bethesda seems to really be dropping the ball here. Well, stripping out everything except for violence and gaslighting us about the value of billionaires. Starfield seems to be a reality of celibate humans whose only vices are food and violence, and the occasional drug made by fisheries. No wonder there are so few children and so many empty planets. Humans have become violent space pandas, which sounds cool, but probably means they are on the path to extinction. The Hunger Games does a better job of painting a future with sex in it, and that is a YA series. YA books are literally not allowed to have sex in them, and yet The Hunger Games still does a better job showing the passion, the ecstasy, and the cruelty that makes up human desire. And these space pandas are dumb. Like idiocracy dumb. Let's talk about terramorphs. They are basically space deathclaws with psychic powers that literally show up on every colony after 60 to 80 years, and people just accept it. Like, an entire colony was eaten by these things, and no one has tried to figure out why. Should we try to figure out why these monsters show up and kill everyone? Why would we do that? This is like using Brondo, the thirst mutilator, to water your crops level of dumb. You know what? I've changed my mind. The humans of Starfield are dumber than the humans of Idiocracy, because President Camacho could have fixed all of this, and he could have done it in 1 week. Seriously though, the writing in this game is so uneven, and overall, it's kind of awful. Like worse than Season 8 of Game of Thrones awful. Don't get me wrong, there are the occasional high points, but it doesn't appear that the plot was nearly as important a priority as coding high-resolution instant noodles. And the romance. Ugh. I thought Baldur's Gate 3's Legion of Thirsty NPCs was bad writing. After seeing the wooden deliveries of these soulless Starfield companions over the last 100 hours, I owe Larian Studios an apology. Vasco was the most human of all of them, but unfortunately was unromanceable. Speaking of disappointment, I keep getting told in the game that the colony war from 10 years ago was the worst thing possible in a space war. Obviously, no one in this reality has ever watched Mobile Suit Gundam. Drop a couple of large asteroids on a few of these planets, and then let me know what they think is bad. I could just continue to rant about how weird and confusing this game is, but I think that most of these issues could have been resolved by hiring competent people to address this stuff. Well, and actual writers. Movies and TV shows will use experts to make sure they have the right costumes for a period piece. I'm not saying this is easy. James Cameron made a life-size model of the Titanic, well, half of one, and still screwed up the star map of the sky, but he eventually fixed it after being called out by Neil deGrasse Tyson. But I guess you had no intention of using Neil, because you classified Pluto as a planet in your game. Video games are the biggest form of media in the world. Bigger than movies, bigger than music or TV, bigger than books. Is it too much to expect a game that took over 7 years and hundreds of millions of dollars to make to meet some standard expectations of other forms of media? And this is not a lofty goal. Mass Effect came out with a better story about how an initial contact with a precursor artifact leads to a galactic odyssey, and it came out 16 years ago. Incidentally, it also had way better romances. Starfield is fun, but it is also a confusing, conflicted mess. Hopefully we'll see something amazing emerge on the backs of unpaid modders, but until then we'll just have to wait. In the meantime, someone really should ask Todd what he did with all the Christians and the Muslims. Until next time, no shaming, just gaming. I just passed 2.5 years in my journey into sex-positive gaming, and I really appreciate all the advice and support everyone has given me along the way. Because of what I talk about, my videos are rarely monetized on YouTube, so all of my financial support comes from Patreon. Thank you so much to all my patrons, especially Xabron, Hiroka, Cacophony of Failure, Lockhart, Anon, Blade Rune 9, MK Dermo, Sludart, Trude Perkins, and Tyler Hunter. You all rock.